Rain slashed against the windshield like broken glass. Vivian Cole, the woman who owned 17 skyscrapers in downtown Seattle, stood shivering on a stranger's porch in a $200 blouse now worth nothing. Her Mercedes died 3 miles back. Her phone, dead. Her pride, drowning. The door creaked open. A man appeared, sawdust in his hair, a sleeping child curled against his chest. She swallowed hard. "Can I stay overnight? I'll pay whatever you want." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "Ma'am, my house is small, but no one gets left out in a storm." He didn't take her money. He didn't ask her name. He just opened his door to a stranger. She had closed million-dollar deals without flinching. So why did his answer make her heart stop? What she discovered inside that tiny house would cost her everything she thought she wanted, and give her something money could never buy. The warmth hit her like a wave the moment she stepped inside. It was not the sharp, sterile heat of her penthouse with its automated climate control. This was different. Wood smoke and cinnamon. Something baking in an old oven. The kind of warmth that wrapped around your bones and refused to let go. Vivian stood in the doorway, water pooling at her feet, and for a moment she forgot how to move. The man named Derek shifted the sleeping child in his arms and gestured toward the hallway with his chin. His movements were slow, deliberate, careful not to wake the little girl whose auburn curls spilled across his flannel shirt like autumn leaves. She followed him through a living room that was smaller than her closet. A worn couch with a hand-knitted blanket. Shelves lined with children's books, their spines cracked from use. Photographs everywhere, covering nearly every surface, showing the same two faces in various stages of life. The man and the child. Building sandcastles, blowing out birthday candles, reading under a tree. No woman in any of them. Just the two of them against the world. Vivian's designer heels clicked against the wooden floor, and she suddenly felt like an intruder in a sacred space, like she had stumbled into someone else's church. Derek disappeared down the hallway and returned 5 minutes later without the child. He moved quietly, like a man who had learned to navigate darkness without making a sound. He handed her a bundle of clothes and a towel. His calloused fingers brushing against her manicured ones. The contrast was almost painful. His hands had built things. Hers had only signed papers. "These belong to my wife," he said, and she noticed the past tense like a splinter under her skin. "They might be a little big, but they'll keep you warm." Bathroom's second door on the left. She wanted to ask about the wife, wanted to know what happened, where she went, why her clothes were still here but she was not. But something in his eyes told her the story was not hers to demand. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So she just took the clothes and whispered a thank you that felt entirely inadequate. The bathroom was tiny, barely enough room to turn around. A rubber duck sat on the edge of the tub. A step stool painted with butterflies waited by the sink. Everything in this house was built for small hands, small feet, small dreams. Vivian caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Mascara running down her cheeks, hair plastered to her skull. The woman who commanded boardrooms reduced to a drowned rat in a stranger's bathroom. She changed into the dead woman's clothes, a soft cotton shirt that smelled faintly of lavender, sweatpants with a small hole in the knee. They were too big, just as Derek had said, but they were also the most comfortable things she had worn in years. When she emerged, she found him in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. One had a chip on the rim. The other said, "World's Best Daddy" in crooked letters, clearly painted by a child's hand. He offered her the chipped one, keeping the precious one for himself. Such a small thing. Such a telling choice. They sat across from each other at a kitchen table scarred with knife marks and crayon drawings. The storm raged outside, rattling the windows, making the old house creak and groan, But inside, there was only the sound of rain on the roof and two strangers learning to breathe in the same space. Vivian wrapped her hands around the warm mug and realized she could not remember the last time she had sat still. The last time she had not been checking emails or reviewing contracts or planning her next acquisition. Her phone was dead. Her laptop was in the car. And somehow, impossibly, she felt lighter for it. "So," Derek said finally, his voice low enough not to carry down the hallway, "your car broke down." It was not a question, just an acknowledgement of the obvious. A way to start a conversation without demanding anything in return. She nodded, and something about his patience made her say more than she intended. "I was running away, just for a day, from everything." She laughed, but it came out hollow. "I own a real estate development company, the third largest in the Pacific Northwest, and I have not had a day off in 6 years." He did not look impressed. He did not look horrified. He just looked at her like she had said something profoundly sad. And maybe she had. The next morning, Vivian woke to a sound she did not recognize. It took her several seconds to identify it. Laughter. Pure, unrestrained, bubbling over laughter coming from somewhere deeper in the house. She had slept on the couch despite Derek's insistence that she take his bed. The cushions were lumpy. The springs protested every movement, and she had slept better than she had in months. No phone buzzing with emergencies, no assistant knocking with urgent decisions, just rain on the roof and the deep, dreamless sleep of the thoroughly exhausted. She found them in the kitchen. Derek stood at the stove, wielding a spatula like a sword, while a little girl in star-covered pajamas sat at the table, her face split with the widest grin Vivian had ever seen. The child was maybe 7, all wild auburn curls and freckles and eyes that sparkled with mischief. She was pointing at a pancake on her plate and laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "Daddy, that's not a bear, that's a blob." Derek flipped another pancake with exaggerated flair. "It's an abstract bear, very sophisticated. You wouldn't understand." The little girl giggled harder. "It looks like a potato had a baby with a cloud." Vivian must have made some sound, because they both turned to look at her. The child's eyes went wide with curiosity, not fear. Children in her world were always afraid of her. Their parents made sure of it, warning them to be on their best behavior around Miss Cole. But this child just tilted her head like a curious bird and said, "You're still here? Daddy said you might leave before I woke up." Derek's ears turned slightly pink. "I said she might need to leave early." "Not the same thing, Rosie." Rosie ignored him completely. She slid off her chair and walked right up to Vivian, studying her with the fearless intensity that only children possess. "Your hair is funny," Rosie announced. "It's all pointy and sticky-uppy." Vivian reached up and felt the disaster that her carefully styled hair had become. She should have been mortified. Instead, she found herself smiling. "It got wet in the rain." Rosie nodded sagely. "Rain does that. One time, I went out in the rain, and my hair looked like a porcupine had a fight with a balloon." She grabbed Vivian's hand with her small, sticky fingers. "Come eat breakfast. Daddy made blob bears. They taste better than they look." And just like that, Vivian was pulled into their morning ritual. She sat at the small table and watched something she had never seen before. Derek placed a plate in front of Rosie, and the child reached up with both hands to cup her father's face and kiss his cheek. "Thank you, Daddy. I love you bigger than all the stars." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you bigger than all the galaxies, baby girl." It was clearly a routine, something they said every morning, a small ritual of love repeated so often it had worn grooves into their hearts. Vivian's chest ached with something she could not name. She had built an empire, but she had never built anything like this. The pancakes were misshapen and slightly burned at the edges. They were also the most delicious thing she had eaten in years, maybe ever. Rosie chattered throughout the meal, telling Vivian about her favorite tree and her collection of pretty rocks and the castle that Daddy was building in the living room. Derek interjected occasionally, clarifying or gently redirecting when his daughter got too detailed about something. But mostly he just watched her with an expression that Vivian recognized, but had never experienced. The look of someone whose entire universe had condensed into a single small person. The look of a parent who would burn the world to keep their child safe. After breakfast, Rosie insisted on showing Vivian her room. It was tiny, barely bigger than the walk-in closet in Vivian's penthouse, but every inch was filled with wonder. Drawings taped to every wall, a shelf of rocks arranged by color, a small bed with a patchwork quilt that looked handmade, and in the corner, a rocking chair with a worn stuffed rabbit sitting in it. "That's Mommy's chair," Rosie said matter-of-factly. "She used to rock me in it when I was a baby. Now Mr. Buttons sits there so Mommy can see him from heaven." Vivian's throat closed. She could not speak, could not breathe. Could only stand there in a dead woman's clothes, in a dead woman's house, and feel the weight of a love that had outlasted death itself. Derek was in the garage looking at her car when Vivian found him. His hands were deep in the engine, grease streaking up his forearms, and something about the sight made her stomach do a strange flip. He looked up when he heard her approach and wiped his hands on a rag that was probably cleaner than the hands themselves. "Alternator shot," he said. "Going to need to order a part. Couple days, maybe 3. She should have been frustrated, should have been calculating how to get back to Seattle, how to minimize the damage to her schedule, how to regain control of her carefully ordered life. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Can I stay?" He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes seeing something she was not sure she wanted seen. Most people in your position would call for a helicopter. She almost laughed. She had, in fact, considered it, had even reached for her phone before remembering it was dead. Most people in my position have never had breakfast with a blob bear and a 7-year-old philosopher. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Rosie does have strong opinions about pancake art." He closed the hood of her car with a decisive thunk. "You can stay, but I should warn you, this house doesn't have room service, or a wine cellar, or whatever else billionaires need to survive." The next 3 days were unlike anything Vivian had experienced in her adult life. She helped Rosie collect rocks by the stream behind the house, learning to see beauty in ordinary stones through a child's eyes. She sat on the porch in the evenings, watching Derek work on the castle, his hands moving with a patience and precision that seemed almost meditative. She ate simple meals at the small kitchen table, food that tasted like home, even though she had never had a home that tasted like this. And slowly, something inside her began to shift, like a bone that had healed wrong finally breaking so it could set properly. On the second night, after Rosie was asleep, Derek taught her to carve. They sat at his work table, surrounded by wood shavings and half-finished toys, and he showed her how to hold the knife, how to read the grain, how to coax a shape from something that looked like nothing. His hand closed over hers to adjust her grip, and the heat of his skin made her breath catch. "You're thinking too hard," he murmured. "Don't force it. Let the wood tell you what it wants to be." She wanted to argue that wood was an inanimate object incapable of wanting anything, but his voice was so close to her ear, his chest nearly touching her back, and she found she did not want to argue about anything. Her first carving was terrible, a blob that was supposed to be a bird, but looked more like a potato with ambitions. Derek did not laugh. He turned it over in his hands, studying it with the same seriousness he gave his own work. "Not bad for a first try. You've got steady hands." He set it on the shelf next to his finished pieces, giving her disaster the same respect as his masterpieces. "We'll make a carver of you yet." She looked at the shelf, at her pathetic bird surrounded by his beautiful animals, and felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone had seen her effort instead of her results? When was the last time she had been allowed to fail without consequence? On the third night, Derek showed her the castle, really showed her. He explained every turret, every window, every tiny detail that he had been working on for 2 years. The spiral staircases that actually turned, the drawbridge that raised and lowered, the tiny roses climbing the walls, painted by Rosie's careful hand. Claire always joked about wanting to live in a castle, he said quietly. Said she wanted to be a princess in a tower. I told her I'd build her one someday. He touched one of the miniature figures in the courtyard, a queen with auburn hair. I started it after she passed. Figured if I couldn't build her a real castle while she was alive, I could at least build her one she could see from wherever she is now. Vivian understood then. This house, these toys, this life that looked like poverty from the outside, but was richer than anything she had ever known. It was not about money. It was about love made visible. Every carved animal was a prayer. Every pancake was a promise. Every bedtime story was a fortress, built to keep one small girl safe in a world that had already taken so much from her. Vivian had spent 30 years building an empire. Derek had spent 7 years building a home. And standing there in his workshop, surrounded by sawdust and dreams, she knew which one mattered more. She kissed him on the 4th night. Or maybe he kissed her. It was hard to say who moved first. They were sitting on the porch, watching the stars come out, and he had been telling her about Claire, about how they met in architecture school, how she laughed at his terrible jokes, how she fought the cancer for 3 years before finally letting go. His voice had cracked on that last part, and Vivian had reached for his hand without thinking, their fingers intertwined. He looked at her. She looked at him. And then there was no space between them at all. It was a soft kiss. Tentative, like two people who had forgotten how to want things learning the language again. When they pulled apart, Derek's forehead rested against hers. "This is complicated," he whispered. "I know. You live in a different world. I know. Rosie will get attached." Vivian thought about that little hand grabbing hers, pulling her to breakfast. About sticky fingers and blob-bear pancakes, and rocks arranged by color. "So will I," she admitted. "I think I already am." Derek pulled back to look at her properly. Whatever he saw in her eyes must have answered a question she did not know he was asking, because he kissed her again. Harder this time, like a man who had decided to stop being careful. Everything shattered on the 5th morning. Vivian had borrowed Derek's ancient laptop to check her email, something she had been avoiding since she arrived. The inbox was a disaster. Hundreds of unread messages, increasingly frantic subject lines. But it was the news alerts that made her blood turn to ice. Cole development. CEO missing. Billionaire Vivian. Cole spotted in rural Washington. And the worst one. The one that made her want to throw the laptop through the window. Seattle's ice queen slumming it with handyman lover. The photos were grainy but unmistakable. Her on Derek's porch. Her walking with Rosie by the stream. Her laughing at something Derek had said, her head thrown back, looking nothing like the woman who ran board meetings with an iron fist. The comments were vicious. Speculation about whether she had lost her mind. Jokes about how far the mighty had fallen. Someone had even dug up Derek's bankruptcy records from when Claire's medical bills had nearly destroyed him. They were calling him a gold digger, a con artist, a nobody who had somehow bewitched a billionaire. She was still staring at the screen when her phone rang. She had charged it the night before, but had not turned it on. Now she did. And the voicemail icon showed 47 messages. She listened to the first one. Her CFO, Gregory Morton, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Vivian, the board is demanding an emergency meeting. Patterson is calling for a vote of no confidence. The stock dropped 4% this morning. You need to come back. Now." The second message was from her PR director, the third from her lawyer. By the 5th message, she stopped listening. Derek found her on the porch, phone in one hand, head in the other. He did not ask what was wrong, just sat down beside her and waited. It was one of the things she had come to love about him. He never demanded explanations, never pushed, just offered his presence like a gift and let her decide whether to accept it. "They found us," she said finally. "Paparazzi. The photos are everywhere." She showed him the headlines, watched his jaw tighten as he read the comments about himself. Gold digger, opportunist, trailer trash. He said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat. "You should go." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" He would not look at her, just stared out at the yard, where Rosie's rocks were arranged in careful patterns. "Go back to your world. Fix whatever needs fixing. Forget any of this happened." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "Is that what you want?" His eyes met hers, and she saw the answer there before he said it. He wanted her to stay. Wanted it so badly it was written in every line of his face. But he was giving her an out because that was who he was. A man who opened doors for strangers in storms. A man who put everyone else's comfort before his own. "What I want doesn't matter," he said quietly. "What matters is that my daughter saw those pictures. She's 7 years old, and there are strangers on the internet saying her father is a pathetic loser trying to trap a rich woman. She doesn't understand that. She just knows people are saying mean things about her daddy." His voice broke slightly on the last word. "I will not have her hurt because of me, because I was selfish enough to let myself feel something I had no right to feel." Vivian opened her mouth to argue, to tell him he had every right, to say that she would fight anyone who hurt that little girl. But before she could speak, the door opened. Rosie stood there in her star pajamas, clutching Mr. Buttons to her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying. "Daddy? Why are people saying you're a bad person?" Derek was off the chair and kneeling in front of his daughter before Vivian could blink. He gathered her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "I'm not a bad person, baby girl. Sometimes people say mean things because they don't understand. But those words can't hurt us unless we let them." Rosie sniffled into his shoulder. "Haley at school said her mom saw pictures and said you're an embarrassment." Over his daughter's head, Derek's eyes met Vivian's, and she saw it. The moment he decided to protect his child, even if it meant pushing away the first person he had let himself care about, since Claire died. "Miss Cole has to go home now," he said to Rosie, still holding her tight. "Her car is fixed, and she has important things to do in the city." It was a lie. The part had not even arrived yet, but Vivian understood what he was doing, giving Rosie a clean ending instead of a complicated truth, making the leaving her choice, not his rejection. She wanted to scream, wanted to shake him and tell him this was not the answer. But Rosie was watching her with those big eyes, and Vivian knew he was right about one thing. That little girl had already lost her mother. She could not be the reason Rosie lost her father's reputation too. The drive back to Seattle took 4 hours. 4 hours of replaying every moment, every conversation, every kiss. 4 hours of her phone buzzing with messages she could not bring herself to answer. 4 hours of watching the countryside give way to suburbs, give way to the glittering skyline she had spent her whole life building. It looked different now. Smaller somehow. Less impressive. She pulled into the parking garage of her building and sat in the car for 20 minutes, unable to make herself move. The emergency board meeting was already in session when she arrived. She walked in wearing the same clothes she had worn when she left Derek's house. A simple blouse, jeans, flats instead of heels. The reaction was immediate. Harrison Patterson looked at her like she had grown a second head. "My God, Vivian, you look like—" He trailed off, apparently unable to find words for what she looked like. "A person?" she suggested. Is that what you were going to say? I look like a person instead of a machine? She took her seat at the head of the table and looked around at the faces she had known for decades. These were her people, her team, the ones who had helped her build Cole Development from nothing. And right now, every single one of them was looking at her like she was a stranger. Patterson led the charge, as she knew he would. He had been angling for her position for years, and this was his chance. The photos are a disaster. The stockholders are in a panic. Your personal life is your business. But when it starts affecting the company's bottom line, he slid a folder across the table. We've prepared a statement. You'll deny any romantic involvement, express regret for any confusion, and commit to a period of focused leadership. No personal distractions. No more. He waved his hand vaguely. Whatever this was. Vivian opened the folder. Read the carefully crafted lies, the phrases designed to distance her from everything that had happened. Dismiss it as a momentary lapse in judgment. Erase Derek and Rosie like they were a mistake to be corrected. Something crystallized inside her, a clarity she had not felt in years, maybe ever. She closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. No. Patterson blinked. Excuse me. She stood up, and something in her posture made everyone else go still. I said no. I'm not reading this statement. I'm not denying anything. And I'm not pretending that the best 5 days of my life were some kind of breakdown to be apologized for. The silence in the room was absolute. She could hear the air conditioning humming, someone's watch ticking, the distant sound of traffic far below. Let me tell you what I found in that house, she said. I found a man who builds castles out of wood because he promised his dying wife he would make her a princess. I found a little girl who arranges rocks by color and believes her mother watches over her from heaven. I found pancakes shaped like blobs and bedtime stories, and a kind of love I didn't know still existed in this world. Her voice cracked, but she did not stop. I have spent 30 years sacrificing everything for this company. My health, my relationships, any chance at a normal life. And in return, I have buildings with my name on them, and a stock portfolio and an empty penthouse where no one has ever made me breakfast just because they wanted to see me smile. Catherine Webb, the only board member whose opinion Vivian truly valued, leaned forward. What are you saying, Vivian? She took a breath. Let it out. Made the choice. I'm saying that I own 53% of this company. I'm saying that you can accept my decision, or you can try to force me out. But you will lose. And I'm saying that I am done pretending to be something I'm not. She looked directly at Patterson, at his perfectly pressed suit, and his perfectly styled hair, and his perfect mask of corporate competence. Those photos showed me laughing. Actually laughing. When was the last time any of you saw me do that? When was the last time any of you did it yourselves? The meeting ended with nothing resolved, but Vivian did not care. She had somewhere else to be. She scheduled a press conference for the next morning and spent the night writing and rewriting what she wanted to say. Her PR team sent her scripts. She threw them all away. When she finally stood in front of the cameras, facing a room full of reporters hungry for scandal, she did not read from notes. She spoke from somewhere deeper. 3 days ago, you published photos of me at a house in rural Washington. I'm not here to explain them. I'm here to tell you what they meant. She told them about Derek, about Rosie, about blob-bear pancakes and wooden castles, and a love that had outlasted death. She told them about sitting on a worn couch for the first time in 6 years without checking her email, about learning to carve a bird that looked like a potato, about a little girl who grabbed her hand and pulled her into a world she had forgotten existed. She did not apologize, did not explain, did not give them the narrative they wanted. Instead, she gave them the truth. I built an empire, she said at the end, and somewhere along the way, I forgot to build a life. These past few days showed me what I've been missing, And I'm not going to pretend otherwise to protect a stock price. The reporters erupted with questions. She answered none of them, just walked out of the room and kept walking until she reached her car. Her phone was buzzing with reactions. Social media was exploding. The stock was doing something, either crashing or soaring. She did not check. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the small wooden bird sitting on her dashboard. She had taken it from Derek's shelf the morning she left, had not even realized she'd done it until she was halfway to Seattle. It was terrible, misshapen, amateur in every way, and it was the most precious thing she owned. She drove back the next morning. No helicopter, no private jet. Just her and the road, and 4 hours to figure out what she was going to say. In the end, she decided not to plan it. Some things could not be scripted. Some things had to be felt in the moment, or not at all. The sun was setting when she pulled up to the small house with the peeling paint and the crooked porch. Everything looked the same. The yard with Rosie's rock collections, the garage where Derek worked on his carvings, the window where warm light spilled out like a promise. She sat in the car for a long moment, gathering courage she had never needed in any boardroom. Derek was on the porch when she got out. He must have heard the car, must have been waiting, though she could not let herself hope for what that might mean. He looked tired, like he had not slept, like he had been carrying something heavy for days. They stared at each other across the yard, neither moving. Then the front door banged open, and a small tornado in star pajamas came flying down the steps. "You came back! You came back!" Rosie slammed into her legs with the force of a tiny hurricane, arms wrapping tight, face pressed against her stomach. "Daddy said you might not come back, but I knew you would. I knew it. I told Mr. Buttons, and he knew it too." Vivian knelt down, bringing herself to Rosie's level. The little girl's face was streaked with what might have been tears, or might have been peanut butter. Probably both. "I saw you on TV," Rosie said. "You told everyone about our pancakes, and Daddy's castle, and you said nice things about us." Her lower lip trembled. The mean people on the computer stopped saying mean things after that. Mostly. Vivian brushed a curl out of Rosie's face. "I should have said those things sooner. I should have said them before I left." She looked up at Derek, still standing on the porch, still watching with that unreadable expression. "I should never have left at all." She stood, keeping Rosie's hand in hers, and walked toward the porch. Derek met her at the bottom of the steps. Up close, she could see how tired he really was, the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. But there was something else there too. Something that looked like hope, trying very hard not to believe in itself. "You did a press conference," he said. It was not a question. "I did. You told them everything." "I did." He shook his head slowly, but there was a hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. "You're insane. Your stock probably crashed. Your board probably hates you. Your career is probably—" She kissed him. It was not a soft kiss like before. This one was a declaration, a promise, a line drawn in the sand. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide. Rosie was giggling. Somewhere in the distance, a bird was singing. "I don't care about the stock," Vivian said. "I don't care about the board. And my career is whatever I decide it is, because I own the company." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "But I do care about this." Derek took the folder, frowning. She watched his face as he read, the confusion shifting to understanding, the understanding shifting to something that looked like wonder. "This is an investment proposal," he said slowly, "for a toy workshop." She nodded. "Proper equipment. Employees if you want them. A real business. Not just farmers' market sales. Those carvings you make, Derek, they're art. They deserve to be seen by more than just the people lucky enough to stumble onto your table." He kept reading, his frown deepening. "This says 50-50 partnership, equal ownership." She nodded again. "Not charity. Not a gift. A partnership. You build them. I help you sell them. We split everything down the middle." He looked up at her, and she saw the pride warring with the practicality, the desire to say yes, fighting with years of doing everything alone. "I don't need rescuing," he said quietly. She laughed, and it was a real laugh, the kind she had learned in this house. "Derek, I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to join you." She stepped closer, taking his free hand. "I spent 30 years building an empire, alone. And you know what I learned? It's exhausting. It's empty. And it's nowhere near as impressive as building a castle out of wood because you promised someone you loved." Rosie tugged on her father's sleeve. "Say yes, Daddy. Then Vivian can stay forever, and we can have blob-bear pancakes every morning." Derek looked at his daughter, at the woman holding his hand, at the folder full of possibilities he had never let himself imagine. "This isn't going to be easy," he said finally. "I know. People will talk. The press will follow you here. Our lives will never be simple." "I know. And I make terrible coffee," she smiled. "I know that too. I drank it anyway." He pulled her closer, one arm wrapping around her waist. His other hand still held the folder, crinkling the pages. "You're really going to give up your penthouse for this?" For a small house with a leaky roof and a 7-year-old who thinks breakfast should be an art form? Vivian looked at the house, at the warm light in the windows, at the little girl bouncing with barely contained excitement, at the man who had opened his door to a stranger in a storm and somehow opened a door in her heart that she had not even known was closed. "I'm not giving up anything," she said. "I'm finally getting something I didn't know I was missing." She pulled the wooden bird out of her pocket, the terrible, misshapen, perfect wooden bird. "You said this was my first try, that we'd make a carver of me yet." She placed it in his hand. "So teach me. Teach me how to build something that matters." Derek looked at the bird for a long moment. Then he looked at her. And then he laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere deep and had not seen daylight in a long time. He set the bird on the porch railing, right next to a pot of flowers that Rosie had painted herself. Then he cupped Vivian's face in both hands and kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "Welcome home, Vivian Cole," he whispered, "such as it is." She wrapped her arms around him, feeling Rosie squeeze between them to join the hug, feeling the warmth of this small family that had somehow become hers. "It's perfect," she said. "It's absolutely perfect." And for the first time in her life, she meant it. The sun finished setting. The stars came out one by one, the same stars that Derek and Rosie watched every night from this same porch. Somewhere inside, the castle waited to be finished. Somewhere in Seattle, her empire continued to run without her. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the calloused hand holding hers, the small body pressed against her side, the sound of crickets, and the smell of wood smoke, and the feeling, finally, of being exactly where she belonged. She had asked to stay overnight. She had offered to pay whatever he wanted, and he had given her something money could never buy. He had given her a home,